Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to learn about observation skills, how we can improve our observation skills, and what the job of a forensic scientist entails. Observation is what you perceive using your five senses. We are constantly gathering information about what's around us. The brain actually filters this information because the constant flow of sensory data would just overload the brain. Perception is the interpretation of the information that we receive. And what a person pays attention to really depends on what they think is most likely to be important. And it can also have to do with what their interests are or their past experiences are. For example, if you are walking down the street on a nice sunny day and everything seems normal, and then you hear a car swerving around the corner and the tires screeching, well, you're likely to turn around and pay attention to that because that could be important because somebody could get hurt. Also, on the other end, if you are interested in cars, for example, you might notice the make of a car that someone was driving. If you're into fashion, you might notice the clothing or shoes that someone was wearing. Perception is faulty. It's often inaccurate because, as previously mentioned, the brain filters information. The brain also fills in gaps and fills in information that's not really even there. For example, when you read a sentence with a word missing or perhaps a misspelled word, the brain actually predicts what word should be there or what the spelling should be and fills it in, and we read it as if it's complete and correct. And this is what sometimes makes it hard to proofread your own work. Your brain also applies previous knowledge to new situations. There was a study using a vanilla flavored dessert that was colored pink, and when people tasted it, their perception was that it was strawberry flavored because that's what they had come to expect from a pink dessert. Observations by witnesses are often faulty and inaccurate, and in many cases, there might be some issues present that can affect a witness's recollection. For example, they just might be too agitated, upset, or frightened to make an accurate observation. This, unfortunately, has led to people being falsely convicted. In addition, observations are greatly influenced by emotional state, which kind of goes along with the previous slide. A relaxed state of mind is best to make a good observation. Think about a time when you have felt upset. Maybe you just had a fight with a friend or a significant other, and you are just in your own world, and somebody says hello to you in the hall, and you don't even notice because you're just so focused on what's going on in your own head. Also, whether you're alone or with other people, how many people are around, what type of activity is going on, how much activity is going on. You know, the type of activity, if it's a crime being committed, you could have anxiety and fear in a very stressful time. These two pictures represent on the left Bobby Poole, who was the actual rapist, and Ronald Cotton, who was unfortunately the person that was convicted of the rape and did eventually um, get out after DNA testing was performed after he was already in jail for many years. We'll talk about that case in class. Eyewitness accounts will often vary from person to person. Police officers can question witnesses, and they can get five different people saying five different stories. And part of it is just affected by the limits of perception that I already mentioned. Also, if the eyewitness is in question till a while after the crime, the memory tends to fade over time. And eyewitnesses may have their own prejudices, personal beliefs, their interests and motives that influence what they remember or how they remember something. And in many cases, eyewitnesses really believe what they saw, and they can be very convincing to jurors, even if the account that they give is actually incorrect. And that's really where the Innocence Project came about. It began in 1992 once DNA testing became widely available and was taking off as a new tool that was revolutionizing solving crimes. You know, there were people who had proclaimed their innocence for many years, and now here was this tool available. If there was any biological evidence, they could go back and examine it and determine if they actually had committed the crime. This was started by Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, who are both practicing lawyers and professors. They are professors at the Benjamin and Cardozo School of Law. And they use DNA evidence to re-examine some cases. And in examining, and these cases were individuals that were convicted and in prison. And in examining 200 wrongful convictions, it was found that faulty eyewitness testimony contributed to 87% of wrongful convictions. So the eyewitness identified the wrong person. And one of the things that you need to understand is that you need to train yourself. Forensic scientists need to train themselves to be a good observer. We have to understand that we are not naturally inclined to pay attention to all parts of our surroundings. So a good observer must make a conscious effort to observe the environment systematically. And since we are naturally inclined to filter out unimportant information, we have to train ourselves not to filter, because at a crime scene, we don't know what may turn out to be important. So we have to observe everything. And of course, we have to gather as much information as possible before we interpret anything. And observations should be documented, notes need to be taken, and photographs, and in some cases, sketching the crime scene. I talked about on the first or second day of school the definition of forensic science, and basically it is the business of providing timely, accurate, and thorough information to all levels of decision makers in the criminal justice system. And they're using scientific evidence, applying it to matters of law to solve crimes. The word forensic is derived from the Latin word forensis, meaning forum. It was a public place where, in Roman times, senators and others debated and held judicial proceedings. So during the time of the Romans, a criminal charge meant presenting the case before the public. Both the person accused of the crime and the accuser would give speeches based on their side of the story. The individual with the best argument would determine the outcome of the case. So that is, I guess, not too far from what lawyers attempt to do in refuting the evidence, but at least we do have physical and scientific evidence. So what forensic scientists do? I talked a little bit about some of the forensic scientist specialties already, and we're going to learn about all the different areas of forensic science, fingerprinting, DNA, and usually people specialize in one area. So forensic scientists find, examine, evaluate evidence at crime scenes. And they also testify as expert witnesses at trials where they will present data, weigh evidence, give opinions to the court. Also, they perform scientific research and train other scientists. So there's a lot to being a forensic scientist. And that is it for this video. If you have any questions, please see me in class.